Okay. Do you hear me? Okay, so today we have a new lesson about the backend development. But it doesn't mean that we are not working with UJS anymore. So don't worry, we're still working on with that. It's just that we need to keep going with the lesson so that we can work with the project. You already know that project is almost reached the first presentation. So I think I need to focus on the backend as well. Right, so what you learned so far from the first semester until now is on this section. Okay, we call it the front end. Lư nhầm dở. Lư rồi. Template. Insert card is some kind of Hello, Lư on.
Lư.
Okay. So let's continue. From what you learned so far since the first semester until now is mostly on the front end side. Okay. So what you are doing until now is to create the application so that the user can see, so that the user can interact with by create a button, by using the image, putting everything, and then it can be rendered on the browser so that user can see. And it is called the front end section. It is about 20%, like you see here, 20%. Actually, it's more than that because we are using UJS, which is the server client-side rendering. So there are a lot of tasks to do on the front end as well. Anyway, for web development, you need to have another section at the back. We call it backend. And it's a place where your data is stored, how you define your logic, and also how you secure your application. So this is also important. But normally for web developer, they don't really need to work on both sections because it's a lot of tasks to do. That's why we have a developer called front-end developer, and sometimes they call it back-end developer. So maybe sometimes they will going to ask you, which developer are you? You are a back-end developer, or maybe you are a front-end developer, right? For me, in my case, I am more tend to be the back-end developer because I work a lot with the back-end. But I can also call myself as a full stack developer because I can work on both. I can design UI, I can create the interface for user to see. I also can create the backend by myself. So if you can do both of this, we call it a full stack developer. All right. But in our section today, we are going to focus on this section. What is the backend developer? What are the tasks that you need to do? What are your responsibilities? And also some technology that you need to know. All right. So why do you need to learn about the backend? The backend, you can call it as behind the screen, the scene, behind the scene of web application. Web application that you see in your browser is only a section for user to see, but actually there are a lot of things to do at the back. That's why we call it behind the scene, because this is something that the user doesn't see. They don't know what is going on. They just see the result. And here's some of the benefit of the backend development. For a web application to have the backend development, it can share that information faster. It can functional in various environments. Environment here refer to the application environment. It can be in different operating system, can be in Linux, can be in Windows, can be in Mac. but we can see in the same result. It affects the user experience because with backend, it allows you to do various more tasks like keeping the user identity. I can identify which user are accessing to other application. I can provide the exact or you say a good experience for that user. Okay? For example, you are using Facebook. When you log in, you will see the related information that you want to know based on what you have searched in the history. Maybe you're interested in the car, so that they show a lot of information related to car, or maybe you are like music, so it will show a lot of information related to music, right? To be able to do all of that, it depends on the server where they collect your information and then render it differently based on the user experience. We can also store the data in a central way so that it can be shared later on, or even you change your device on the front end. Okay? So there are a lot more. Here just some small benefit of it. That's why we need backend for our web application. For backend developer, there are a lot of programming language that you can choose from. For front end, actually you only work with 3 languages: HTML, CS, and JavaScript. And actually HTML and CS doesn't count as a language as well, just some data representation. But when you talk about the backend, there are a lot of choice that you can choose from. And here just top 10, but actually there are more than that. One is the Java. You can create Java to build the backend server. You can also have Ruby, Python, PHP, SQL here actually for the database. So this one is to connect with the database, to do query with the database. We have the JavaScript, we have Rust, C++, Node.js, and Solidity, and more. All right, and we are not going to cover everything in here. There are a lot of things if we learn all of this programming language, it takes a lot of time. So we chose only 1 or 2 from here that we are going to work with. But actually, I don't limit your you are willing to learn. If you want to learn more programming language, it's fine as well. But here, normally when we build the backend software, it depends on what you are going to build. It doesn't mean that you should use any language for the same purpose. Some programming language is good for in some case. Some other programming language is good for other case. So it depends. For example, if you want to use the Java or Python, normally they use Java or Python in case they want to build some data with high security, like the software for the bank, software to manage money. That data is very sensitive. Okay, because Java and Python have a very stable foundation. It developed quite long ago, and then the version is not increased quickly like PHP or JavaScript or some other language. So it's very I should say a very good foundation. And then the program itself have a lot of secure package that assists you to secure your data when you build your application. Okay, but there is also a drawback as well. Like Java, it requires a massive memory. So to deploy a Java application, you need to have a very big server which have a lot of memory, maybe at least 4 GB just to deploy that. So normally, if we are building software like that, they always compare between Java or Python, and most cases they use Python because it consumes less resource. See, so it doesn't mean that if you learn only one language, you can use it in any case. It's not like that. Programming language, it still depends on the scenario of the software that you want to build. All right. So here is some description that you can read on what is the language about, and some popular update they build based on that programming language. Okay, see like Java, you can see cache up here. I said it's about security. But this is for the whole world when we talk about the top 10 backend. But in Cambodia, some programming language is not very well known. In Cambodia, mostly for the marketplace, I think Python, PHP, and JavaScript should be the top 3 of the current market in Cambodia. This is what I learned from when people contact school, which developer they want to have, they want to hire. So normally they ask for PHP or Python or maybe JavaScript. Okay. So for the language, it's not very popular in Cambodia, but outside it's very popular as well. All right, any question? Good, right?
Teacher, but JavaScript is only used for on the browser only. How can you use for backend language?
You mean JavaScript?
Usually use Node.js, right?
You mean JavaScript, right?
Yes.
Actually, Node.js.
It's like
yeah, go on.
I mean, it's like a pure JavaScript, not a framework.
Yes. All right. It's a bit complicated here because actually what you said is right. JavaScript is a programming language that you can write in the browser, but why you can write it in the backend as well, right? Actually, Node.js is not a language. I don't call it a language. It should be kind of an environment. But this environment requires JavaScript. Okay. So when you talk about Node.js here, it's like you see here the runtime, right? It requires JavaScript to write your code. Okay. So when you use Node.js, you are required to use JavaScript to write your code. Okay. And JavaScript, just like what you said, is a programming language, but not a framework. And normally, when we develop backend software, we are not using the raw programming language. We use a framework. Even for Java, we use JavaScript, Java framework. But I think I forgot, like Spring, for example. I think Java framework, a very popular one called Spring framework. We have Ruby, but they don't use Ruby directly. They use a framework called Ruby on Rails. Python, the same thing. They use Django, which is the framework of Python. PHP, they use Laravel to write PHP. And actually is for the database, so skip this one. And JavaScript, like that, we don't use it directly. We use a framework, which is the Express, and actually is another version of Node.js. Express.js is a framework of JavaScript. All right. But it's also possible if you want to build the backend just with the raw programming language like that. It's just that you need to do a lot of things by yourself. With framework, it assists you a lot. You don't need to do many things because it's already built in. Okay. But in our case, normally we use framework. It helps us save a lot of time. And here is the in the schema, you can call it architecture, and you always found it during your senior presentation. They always put it like this because it's the most simple schema between backend and front end. In here, it is a browser. We call it client side or we call it front end. And the back is combined of two sections, which is the web server and the database. The web server is used to handle requests and manipulate response accordingly. It depends on the request that user accept from the browser here. And the web server actually is the computer that that run all the time, most of the time. So when you talk about server, it's actually a computer that installs some web server software so that it can handle the request from the browser. You can also turn your computer or your laptop to be a web server as well, as long as you can connect it to the internet and allow all the computer access to your laptop. So you can turn your laptop to be a web server as well. And then there's the database. The database here, normally they can install it directly inside the web server, or for better security reason, they can install it in separate server, so that in case some people have access to your web server, they still cannot access to the database. Okay, but normally for some small projects, some small software, like I did last time, I normally install together. I ran a computer online called web hosting, and maybe you heard of it. We just ran a computer online, and then I used that to install the database, so it became a web server as well as the database server, right? And the database here is used to store, to retrieve, to delete, or update your data. Any question? Right. So here are some skill sets that require you to learn to become a backend developer. But normally, you don't really need to learn everything here. If you can learn everything here, you will become a very good backend developer. But I cannot find people, maybe I don't know people that learn everything about me. I learn mostly on this section, but for this, I cannot handle it by myself. Okay, so there are other skills required for you to become a backend developer. When we talk about the server, we talk about the one that be able to handle your server. And to handle the server, there are a lot of tasks to do. First, here we talk about the software that turn your computer to become a web server. Like I said before, server is actually just a computer which is running almost all the time, and it's used to process data, right? But to become a web server, you need to set up some software here, like Apache, Nginx, Microsoft IIS, Google Cloud, or AWS. For these two is for the commercial software. Actually, you cannot install it in your computer, but you can subscribe to use it, like Google Cloud. Firebase for last session is one of the Google Cloud service, AWS. But for these three, you can install it in your computer to turn your server to become a web server here. Apache is the most widely used web server. It is free and open source. And Nginx as well, but Microsoft IIS not. You need to have the license to deploy this. Okay. So anyways, for be able to be a server engineer, you need to know how to set this up. And actually, it's quite easy to do that. Just double-click install. But what is important is here. Set up the software from the previous slide is just the first step. But to be able to handle the server, you need to have more skill, like security analysis, data protection, server protection, backup and restore database, auto deployment, or maybe rollback if the server has something wrong, you want to roll it back, data encryption, task schedule, command script, and a lot more. See? So there are a lot of things just related to the server section here. That's why currently there is another job title called DevOps engineer, and that DevOps engineer responsible for all of this. Okay. For me, I just know maybe quite a little bit, maybe 10 to 20% about how it works. I know the general idea how it works, but for me to do all this, I cannot do that. But anyway, for backend developer, even you cannot do it by yourself, at least you need to know how it works, so that if something went wrong, you can talk to the DevOps engineer. And in some small company, they don't have the DevOps engineer, so maybe it's become the backend developer task as well to know, right? And then about the database and cache, here is some skill that you need to know. It's important for backend developer to understand how to communicate with the database, because it's one of the biggest tasks for backend developer. But to set it up, it can one of the tasks of DevOps engineer. Okay, but normally for us as a student, we set it up by ourselves. And in our case, we use local host. Normally, we don't really set it in a very complicated way. We just use some software like the WAM server or LAM server. Just install it, and then you have your web server ready, you have your database server ready. But actually, in the production server, they have separate server. They need to set a lot of things. All right. But it can be one of the DevOps engineer. So what is important for the backend developer is how is to design the database. What kind of database you should use? Maybe you use MySQL, maybe you use Oracle, maybe a Postgres or MongoDB, or many more, because there are a lot of databases that you need to choose from. And I think you should already learn about it in another course, maybe database design, right? We should talk about all that. So you need first to decide which one of the database you should use, and then you need to design the database schema inside, depend on the project you are working on. So like in our project, we have 96 now. I don't know if you already designed it yet, but it will be one task for your team to work on. You need to decide the database that you want to use and how you design it. Okay, so this is one of the tasks for backend developer. After designing the database, you also need to learn how to do the query to get the data back or to modify the data inside your database. Okay. The third task here is about the API. And API, we have a REST or a SOAP. API is coming from the word application programming interface. API is an interface that allows front end connect to the backend. But it's not always used. It depends on how you build your web application. If you build your web application like client-side rendering, API will be a must, will be required. But because client-side, when it renders by itself, it still needs data, and it needs to request to the backend to get the data. And to get the data, we use the API. But if you are building your web application or website using the server-side rendering, API is not a must. API can we can remove API because server can get the data directly from the database and convert it into the user interface that user sees. And so API is not necessary in that case. Right? But normally for current web application nowadays, they are mostly build the client-side rendering, because normally when we build the website, we still have need to have mobile app, right? Mobile app is one of the client-side rendering. It's you cannot render you cannot build server-side rendering on mobile app, because the app itself is located inside the mobile application, and to make your mobile application running, it still need data. In that case, you still need to call the API. But if you want to build just a simple website which doesn't need a mobile app, you can build a website with a server-side rendering, and in that case, you don't need to have the API. Got it? All right. And API, there are two options that you can work on. One is called REST, or another one is called SOAP. REST is just it's not a protocol. REST is how you communicate between the backend, and then what is the format of data that return back to the front end. It can be in HTML format, it can be in JSON format, it can be in other format. It's up to how you design. But when we talk about SOAP, SOAP is a simple object access protocol. It's actually a protocol that allows you to communicate between client and browser. When we talk about API, we are going to work to send data through the HTTP protocol. Do you know what is the protocol, right? HTTP is one of the protocol. SOAP is also another protocol. Okay? Protocol is the way that you can transfer between client and server. Okay? And if you want to see more detail about the comparison between the REST API or SOAP, you can see here. Click on it. The slide presentation I uploaded into the class material, so you can go through it, and you can click in here to see more detail. Or maybe just type comparison SOAP or REST API in the browser. You will see a lot of documents talking about that. Yes.
I can click here, because when I click, it's not a link.
Really? Mình sẽ một click on it. Cái gì bạn mà này click mấy bạn mà này ví dụ chỉ presentation đi nhầm thua gì tấm hết click nó này bị bạn thêm một chuyện the browser. Okay.
Yes, sir. Bên trong số slide môn tính.
Bạn.
Yeah. Head ấy bạn cái mình do client tới connect database mong.
Your client to connect database.
But
the question is, why don't we use client to connect to database directly? Okay. So if you use client to connect to database directly, what happens? First, you need to know that to connect to the database, you need to have username, you need to have a password, and some other key to make sure that the one that connects to the database is the right person, right? You cannot allow anyone to connect the database, right? It doesn't secure anymore. Is that correct? But if you allow the client is something that anyone can access. Anyone have the URL of your website can access to that client application. So if you do like that, anyone can access to your application, also be able to connect to your database. And if you tell your database to something that is very insecure, you got the idea? So prevent that, you need to have something else in between client and database. And that something else here can allow user to connect to the database based on the identity of the user. Server can manage user identity. Server can see that who is the one accessing or making the request based on the session, based on the cookie, based on the token that user pass through with the request. Okay, with that, server can identify you are the system admin, so you are allowed to access the database. You are only the guest, so you cannot update or modify. You can only view. Okay, so that's why backend here is important, and normally we don't allow client to access to the database directly. Is it clear?
Yes.
Any other question? Means no exchange there. បញ្ជាក់ខ្ញុំបើខ្ញុំនិយាយអង់គ្លេសអត់ច្បាស់អីខ្ញុំអាចនិយាយជាខ្មែរម្ដងទៀតគាត់តែចាំបាច់ខ្ញុំត្រូវបញ្ចូលភាសាអង់គ្លេសមកតង់សិនបត់ច្បាស់ប្រាប់ខ្ញុំ Okay. Next what today? So we keep going then. Okay. So we come to the programming language. From this slide presentation you see here, to become the backend developer, you need to have the server skill, database skill, API skill, and the programming language skill. And the API skill here actually is not just about to understand what is API, what is the scope, but actually to define the API. When we talk about defining the API, we are talking how the API should be look like. What is the request format? What is the data should be respond back to the browser? All right. So API here is not just understanding how or what is API, but to design the API. Okay. And here we are talking about the programming language. Among all these three, for backend developer, he or she must know or must be able to code, to write your code in here. If you cannot write the code, you are not called a backend developer. Maybe you can be called DevOps engineer, or maybe you can be called a database design engineer. Okay, but not backend developer. But in backend developer is the one who can write code to communicate with the database through the API. All right. So among these four skills, programming language is the most important for backend developer. Okay. For front-end developer, they focus on the UI and UX. UX refer to user experience. UI refer to user interface. User interface is something that you see. User experience is focused on the user behavior. What the button should place where to make the user easy to understand, easy to use your application. Okay, so UX focus on the user experience and UI focus on the interface. But these two belong to the front-end developer. For back-end developer, they don't care about it. They just need to know what front-end developer needs, and then they can build the application which can respond to that need. Okay. So for backend developer, we focus on the security. Security, we talk about infrastructure as well as the data. Make sure that no one can access to your infrastructure beside you or beside your team. The data is secure. People that can allow to read can only read the data and cannot modify the data. People that can allow to write, we allow them to write the data. Okay, so it's about the identity, how you protect your infrastructure, how you protect your data inside. We talk about the performance. Normally, front-end developer don't really care about the performance because it's not necessary. When front-end developer, we just focus on the UI and UX. Software which is run on the browser is running on their use a local machine, right? We transfer the code through the browser and they run it inside their browser. So we don't care, right? Because they use their own computer to write it. But for backend developer, it's different. Backend developer, we use our own server, we use our infrastructure to deploy the code. So if you write something which require a lot of resource, maybe you need to increase your server capacity and it costs a lot, right? So you need to be careful with the performance. What kind of program that you should write? Avoid unlimited loop. Avoid reading and writing data too much into the file system. Okay, so there are a lot of things that you need to think about to increase your program performance. You need also to care about the cost of infrastructure. What kind of database you should use, how much memory that you should use, how much CPU that you need to use. All of those things depend also on the language that you choose as well. Okay, and the last one here is about the migration and adaptability, because technology keep moving forward. So just like PHP, it keep increasing. Currently, it's up until version 8, version 9. So you need to make sure the application can be migrated, or at least can allow the software to connect or to connect with your application from the front end. Okay, so all of these things is the responsibility for backend developer. You see that maybe there are a lot of backend developer, but for some people they prefer to be the backend developer because it's a bit complicated, but the task is very straightforward. It is different from a developer. If you build the front-end application, you need to make sure that your application, the user like your application. The interface look good, it's easy to use. But here, we don't really care about that. If we have a target, we just make sure that the data is rendered, is correct. When the user read, we return the correct data. When user write, we write data in a correct location, and that's it. So sometimes many people like to be the front-end developer, and sometimes they like to be the back-end developer. Even the back-end developer have many more tasks. Okay? And it's up to you which one you prefer. You can be both as a full stack as well. Okay, so here is some actual tasks for the backend developer. I write all of this based on my experience. So even you are not an expert in server engineer, you don't design your server by yourself, but at least you need to do all of this. First, you need to choose and design your database. After understanding the requirement of your project, which kind of what project you are working on, what kind of data format you should responsible on, you need to choose the database correctly. You may choose a relational database like MySQL, Mongo, DynamoDB, or maybe you choose a NoSQL database like MongoDB. So sorry. It depends. It depends on what kind of your application is you are working on. But anyway, for backend developer, if you have a team, you need to discuss among yourself between your team member to choose one and design it. And then you need to define the access pattern from the front end. Okay? What kind of data or what kind of request the front end will pass to you, and what kind of data you should return back to the front end. In this step, normally you discuss as a team between front end and back end developer together. Okay, and then after understanding all of this, you define everything. You need to build and deploy it. when you're talking about beer here, refer to you create a table, you are using among MySQL. You need to build a table, you need to create the attribute inside the table and deploy your database. Okay, so this three is related to database. And then you need to define the routing, which allow front-end developers to access to your database. Okay, and here refer to the API URL. But if you are using the ISO server-side rendering, you need to define the page that can render the data. Okay, and then you need to define your security measure. There are a lot when we talk about security measure, but if we talk about simple app, normally at least you need to work on the authentication, like create register user, login user, collect user information, store it in the session, keep in the cookie, and encrypt some important information, and do some throttle. Throttle here refer to if the front end or maybe the API keep getting a call, maybe someone keep calling your API a lot, maybe someone want to crash your application, you need to block it, maybe have some limit. If there are only more than 5 requests per 10 seconds, for example, you need to block it to protect your server, something like that. All right. And also about the backup and restore, it's important here. Your database need to have some way that you can back it up in case something happen, your database is gone, so at least you have your backup. Okay. Question? It's the end for the introduction. For this slide presentation, I just want to let you know what are the responsibilities for you to become a backend developer, and what is actually a backend developer. តោះនេះចឹង
Yes.
ចឹងបន្ទាប់ពីស្ដាប់ខ្ញុំនិយាយយ៉ាងស្អប់ពងកខ្ញុំសូមសួរវិញតើពួកយើងចង់ខ្លាចជា backend developer ក៏ចង់ខ្លាចជា front end developer ឬក៏ចង់ធ្វើទាំងពីរ មិនហើយ
Yes, sure. សម្រាប់ចេះចង់ចេះអស់តែអត់ដឹងថាទៅរួចអត់ទេ
សំខាន់អានឹងយើងចំណាយពេលធ្វើឯប៉ុន្តែគាត់តែចង់ដឹងគាត់តែចង់សួរថាតើយើងចាប់អារម្មណ៍លើមួយណាជាងព្រោះដូចខ្ញុំនិយាយអញ្ចឹងវាអត់ចាំបាច់ត្រូវធ្វើទាំងពីរទេអត់ចាំបាច់ត្រូវតែចេះ front end ចេះទាំង back end ទេយើងចេះតែមួយហ្នឹងក៏ការងារមិនខ្វះដែរជំនាញរបស់យើងតែមួយណាក៏បានដែរប៉ុន្តែប្រសិនបើយើងចង់លក្ខណៈទៅជា independent យើងអត់ចង់ធ្វើការជា team យើងចង់ធ្វើតែផ្ទះតែឯងអាហ្នឹងត្រូវចេះទាំងពីរព្រោះថាបើយើងធ្វើតែឯងយើងត្រូវ responsible ទាំង back end ទាំង front end យើងចេះទាំងពីរតែប្រសិនបើយើងចូលជាក្រុមហ៊ុនអានោះជាធម្មតាក្រុមហ៊ុនគេយ៉ាងហោចណាស់គេមាន developer សម្រាប់ back end ផ្សេងសម្រាប់ front end ផ្សេងអូខេมันសំខាន់ទេសំខាន់ណាស់ពួកយើងគិតមើលតាមខ្លួនឯងទៅឲ្យយល់ថាអ្វីទៅជា front end developer អ្វីទៅជា back end developer ហើយប្រជិកដែលខ្ញុំឲ្យពួកយើងធ្វើណាប្រជិកការងារហ្នឹងគឺខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យពួកយើង responsible ទាំងពីរដើម្បីឲ្យយើងមាន experience ថាតើយើងចូលចិត្តផ្លូវមួយណាជាងហើយបើសិនបើយើងដឹងដល់ផ្លូវណាយើងចង់ដើរអានឹង focus តែលើហ្នឹងក៏បានដែរអូខេអញ្ចឹង
ខ្ញុំមានសំណួរច្រើនចំពោះការធ្វើ store នៅ database យើងគួរបង្កើត database ច្រើនឬក៏យើងបង្កើត database តែមួយទេ
ជាធម្មតា database របស់យើងបើសិនវិញនិយាយជាទូទៅណាមានតែមួយទេយើងនិយាយជាទូទៅ database យើងមានតែមួយទេគ្រាន់តែក្នុង database មួយយើងមាន table ច្រើនអូខេអានេះខ្ញុំនិយាយពី relational database ណា
បាទច្រើនប៉ុន្តែ database ខ្លះវាមាន SQL ហើយ no SQL
ហ្នឹងហើយ
បាទ
SQL ហ្នឹងគឺក៏ no SQL ហ្នឹងគ្រាន់តែជាប្រភេទរបស់ database យើងមានច្រើនណាមានច្រើនប៉ុន្តែយើងអាចចេញជាពីរប្រភេទសំខាន់ប្រភេទទី1គឺពពួក relational database ឬក៏ឲ្យឈ្មោះថា SQL យើងនិយាយមិញហ្នឹង មួយទៀតគឺជា collection ជា JSON data ហ្នឹងគេហៅឈ្មោះថា NoSQL អូខេដូចយើងធ្វើការពី session មុនគឺប្រើ Firebase ទៅ Firebase ហ្នឹងគឺជាប្រភេទ NoSQL ដែលវាអត់មាន format ច្បាស់លាស់ទេអក្សរ content របស់វាគឺជា text ទាំងអស់ជា JSON object ខុសគ្នាឡើយហ្នឹងហើយពេលយើងបង្កើត software យើងមិនសំខាន់ថាប្រើមួយណាទេមិនមែនត្រូវតែប្រើទាំងពីរទេឬក៏ទល់តែប្រើ SQL បណ្ដាលទល់តែប្រើ NoSQL បណ្ដាលមិនមែនអញ្ចឹងទេប៉ុន្តែគឺជាការសម្រេចចិត្តរបស់យើងថាមួយណាដើរស្រួលជាងវាទៅជាអញ្ចឹងវិញយើងអាច build software ប្រភេទណាក៏បានដែរជាមួយនឹង SQL ដូចគ្នាដែរក៏ខ្ញុំអាច build software ប្រភេទណាក៏បានជាមួយ NoSQL គ្រាន់តែពេលខ្លះវាពិបាកជាងពេលខ្លះវាស្រួលជាងតោះនេះវាអញ្ចឹងទេហើយសំដៅយើង choose យើងរក database មួយហើយយើង build software លើ database ហ្នឹងទៅវាអត់ចាំបាច់ត្រូវការបង្កើត database ផ្សេងទៀតណាយើងបង្កើតតែមួយហ្នឹងគឺបានណាគ្រាន់តែអាហ្នឹងខ្ញុំនិយាយជាលក្ខណៈ general ទេបើសិនបើយើង build software ជាលក្ខណៈ micro architecture អាហ្នឹងតទៅមុខទៀតអាហ្នឹងអាចតាក់ទងមួយមេរៀនផ្សេងជា micro architecture ហ្នឹងមានថា server របស់យើងគឺផ្គុំឡើងដោយ server ច្រើនចូលគ្នារបស់យើងនេះ server តែមួយណាតែថ្ងៃមុខយើងអាចមាន case ផ្សេងដែលយើងត្រូវការមាន server ច្រើនចូលគ្នា server ច្រើនចូលគ្នាផ្គុំគ្នាឡើងបង្កើតបានជា server ធំមួយហើយ server ហ្នឹងគឺគេឲ្យឈ្មោះថា micro architecture ដោយសារតែវាផ្គុំឡើងដោយ micro server ច្រើនហើយក្នុង case មួយហ្នឹង micro server មួយគឺអាចមាន database រៀងៗខ្លួនអញ្ចឹង server ខ្លះអាចប្រើ MySQL server ខ្លះអាចប្រើ Postgres server ខ្លះអាចប្រើ Firebase អញ្ចឹងទៅអូខេតែជាទូទៅគឺយើងមានប្រើ database តែមួយទេហើយក្នុងហ្នឹងវាត្រូវមានច្រើន table អាស្រ័យយើង design យល់ច្បាស់អីចឹង Backend
Yes sir
ហើយភាសាដែលយើងប្រើដូចភាសាខ្ញុំសរសេរនៅនេះចឹងវាមានច្រើនណាទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងប៉ុន្តែយើងនឹងរើសយក JavaScript យកមកប្រើហើយហេតុអីបានយក JavaScript ដោយសារយើងតាំងពីឆ្នាំទី1មកយើងរៀន JavaScript រហូតអូខេយើងរៀន JavaScript យើងយកចូលក្នុង CHUN ហើយ JavaScript ដដែលគឺយើងអាចយកវាមកសរសេរជា Backend បានដោយប្រើ Node.js អញ្ចឹងមានថាយើងប្រើពីរនេះ JavaScript បូកមួយ Node.js យើងសរសេរ JavaScript លើ Node.js environment អូខេហើយមួយទៀតគឺយើងអាចចូលដល់ PHP ហើយហេតុអីបានយើងត្រូវការមាន PHP ដែរហ្នឹងដោយសារទីផ្សារស្រុកខ្មែរទេជាធម្មតានៅពេលដែលចុងឆ្នាំអីចឹងគេបុគ្គលិកហើយ intern អីពីច្រើនគេសួរតែយើងចេះ Laravel អត់ចេះ PHP អត់ដូច្នេះមិនខ្ញុំគិតថាយើងត្រូវការមាន PHP មួយទៀតអញ្ចឹងអានេះអាស្រ័យទីផ្សារស្រុកខ្មែរអាផ្សេងនេះមិនមែនថាអត់ល្អទេណាខ្ញុំនិយាយចឹងខ្ញុំមិននិយាយថា JavaScript និង PHP ល្អទេអាផ្សេងអត់ល្អគឺអាស្រ័យលើស្ថានភាពអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចរៀនថែមខ្លួនឯងបានពួកហ្នឹងសំខាន់គឺ basic អូខេហើយខ្ញុំឃើញ LinkedIn មកបង្ហាញច្រើនហើយខ្ញុំឃើញ ChatGPT ប្រទានគឺតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង Backend ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងមានចំណុចណាមួយចំនួនដែលចង់ឲ្យខ្ញុំ focus លើ Backend ហ្នឹងទេព្រោះខ្ញុំអត់ចង់ចាប់ដើមឡើងវិញទាំងអស់តែម្ដងកុំឲ្យយើងរៀនដដែលចំណុចណាដែលយើងគិតថាសំខាន់ដែលយើងគិតថាគួរតែបន្ថែមអីចឹងអាចប្រាប់ខ្ញុំបានណា
ច្រើនតាមខ្ញុំsurvey គ្នាយើងភាគច្រើនគាត់អត់សូវតន់ឆ្លើយ
លើចំណុចអី
គាត់អត់សូវតន់លើ backend ឆ្លើយគាត់
ទាំងអស់មក
អាច start ចាប់ចេញពីគាត់អត់រៀនសូវច្បាស់ជាមួយនឹងតាំងពីដូច TP 8មកឆ្លើយ
TP 8ធ្វើអីគេ
ខ្ញុំឆែកមើលតិចហ្នឹងថាគាត់និយាយទៅខ្ញុំសួរគ្នាយើងដែរថាគាត់រៀនមិនដែរគាត់ថាអត់សូវយើងចាប់បានអញ្ចឹងច្រើនTP 8តាក់ទងជាមួយនឹងmiddleware
alright ហើយ middleware ហ្នឹងការហ្នឹងប្រើគេប្រើ express មែន
បាទច្រើនប្រើ express
ព្រោះថា framework ទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងក្នុងវាមិនសំខាន់យើងប្រើមួយណាព្រោះពីនិយាយថា middleware ហ្នឹងមួយណាក៏មាន middleware យើងប្រើ PHP ក៏មាន middleware ដែរប្រើ JavaScript ជាមួយ express ក៏មាន middleware អញ្ចឹងអាហ្នឹងវាមានច្រើនកន្លែងអត់អីអញ្ចឹងតាមយើងស្ដាប់មើលយើងអាច focus អាចធ្វើពីដំបូងមកបានអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចអត់ចាំបាច់ focus ចំណុចណាមួយចំទេគឺរៀនឡើងវិញមួយចំនួនweb យើងមាន slide ខ្លីមួយតើតើមួយ express ប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំប្រហែលជាត្រូវកែប្រែ slide បន្តិចដើម្បីកែប្រែ slide បន្តិចដើម្បី adapt ទៅតាមនេះអូខេអញ្ចឹងសម្រាប់ introduction យើងមានប៉ុណ្ណឹងសម្រាប់ backend ហើយ session បន្ទាប់គឺយើងតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង express ខ្ញុំយក express ហ្នឹងមកនិយាយហើយយើងចំណុចដែលយើងបាននិយាយមិញគឺតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង middleware ជាមួយ routing ជាមួយនឹង session ហើយនឹង kite អូខេហើយសម្រាប់ថ្ងៃនេះគឺយើងខ្ញុំគិតថាមិនចាំបាច់ចូលទៅ express នេះភ្លាមទេព្រោះបើសិនប្រើ slide មិនប្រហែលវាអាចខុសពីអ្វីដែលយើងរំពឹងទុកព្រោះនោះយើងចូលច្រើនតិចដែរអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចធ្វើតាក់ទងមួយ to do up របស់យើងកាលពី session មុនបង្ហាញនេះទៅព្រោះថ្ងៃមុនខ្ញុំបង្ហាញមិញបានធម្មតាតាក់ទងមួយ computer property ទេយើងមិនសlife cycle មួយចំនួនហើយជាពិសេសគឺ watch property ដែលខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យយើងឃើញហើយផ្លេចខ្ញុំមាន upload នេះមួយឲ្យនេះ guideline ណាជារូបភាពគ្រាន់រូបធំបន្តិច download វាមកបាន zoom មើល zoom បានអត់ទេយកពីមើលពីនេះតែម្ដងguideline នេះគឺជាលក្ខណៈstep by step ថាយើងគួរទៅផ្លូវណាតើតើមួយ backend ណានេះរូបនេះអូខេអានេះគឺលក្ខណៈ guideline យើងគួរដើរផ្លូវណាខ្លះរកភាសា practice what we learn គេអានេះគ្រាន់តែជា tip ដែលយើងអាចយកមកពិចារណាបានថាគួរយើងដើរផ្លូវណាតើតើមួយ database មួយអីហ្នឹងចឹងខ្ញុំអត់បញ្យល់មួយទេមើលតិចទៅយកពីអ៊ីនធឺណិតមកដែរទេគ្រាន់តែមើលទៅល្អយើងអាចយកមកគិតមើលចាំដែរបាទ
ចាអាចមានសាំ course ដែល follow តាមstep បានអត់ចា
ចង់និយាយទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងហ្មងមែន
អត់ទេដូចមាន tutorial សម្រាប់គ្នាយើងគាត់រៀនឡើងវិញដែរអញ្ចឹង
អូខេចឹងខ្ញុំសាកមើលសិនតែភាគច្រើនវាជាវីដេអូដូចខ្ញុំអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំcontent ដែលខ្ញុំគិតថាល្អភាគច្រើនខ្ញុំយកពី Udemy មកហើយព្រោះមើលតាម Udemy វាមានឧទាហរណ៍មានអីប្រើប្រាស់មានច្រើនណាគ្រាន់តែវាជាវីដេអូវាចំណាយពេលយូរហើយជាពិសេស Udemy វាមានរៀនមួយចំនួនវាឆាច់ហើយตัวយ៉ាងណាខ្ញុំមើលសិនគេមានវីដេអូណាល្អខ្ញុំជំរាបឲ្យអូខេ you come back to do up របស់យើងmusic to do up មានអ្នកណាបាន update ឲ្យថែមពីលើទៀតទេ តែប៉ុន្តែនេះប្រសិនបើយើងចង់ប្រើ Firebase នឹងជា backend ណាអាហ្នឹងដោយសារខ្ញុំបញ្យល់មិញគឺដើម្បីធ្វើ app យើងត្រូវមាន front end backend អញ្ចឹងហើយ backend គឺធ្វើគឺច្រើនតាក់ទងមួយ server តាក់ទងមួយ authentication តាក់ទងជាមួយ security តាក់ទងជាមួយ hosting មួយមកណូអញ្ចឹងហើយបានមានFirebase កើតឡើងឬក៏ AWS ដែលគេចង់ជំនួយយើងកុំឲ្យយើងទៅប្របាក់ធ្វើ backend ឲ្យខ្លួនឯងអូខេអញ្ចឹងហើយបានគេឲ្យ option មួយទៀតគឺប្រើពពួក app ដែលមានស្រាប់ដូច Firebase ជា option មួយយើងអាចប្រើ Firebase ដើរតួជា backend ជំនួសធ្វើម៉េចគ្រាន់តែចេះ connect ទៅវាបង្កើត account មួយ Firebase យើងអាច store data យើងអាច register account ជាមួយវាទាំងអស់អានេះជា option មួយទៀតណាប្រសិនបើយើងអត់ចង់ធ្វើ backend ណាហើយអ្វីដែលយើងបានធ្វើមកដល់ session ថ្ងៃមុនហ្នឹងគឺយើង set up ជាមួយនឹង Firebase យើងប្រើ Vue.js យើងអាច read data ចេញពី collection okay so this what we learned from last session until now we have connect with the Firebase Firebase like I said is another option if you don't want to build your own backend server you don't want to maintain to manage your own server Firebase or AWS is another option with this you don't need to create anything actually just register your account and understand how Firebase works and then you can create an application with just your Vue.js application or with Reactive or with or Angular whatever you choose and then connect with the Firebase and that's it it's simple okay but because it's simple it also have a limitation one is very expensive if you build just a simple app it's okay but if your app is getting bigger and bigger you have more user it will getting more expensive and expensive okay? It's very a very big disadvantage for us so normally I use Firebase or maybe AWS just for some app is small enough for maybe I know that not many users will use it or maybe just for play around like that okay? But if your app is a big like that earn a lot of money as well when user access to your app and you earn money it will be you don't need to worry anymore just in case that you build an app that doesn't earn you money I don't recommend to use Firebase for bigger app just like that okay and there are a lot more things if with Firebase you don't have full control so another disadvantage of it in case you want to back up manually you want to control your data based on what you want it cannot allow to do that okay anyway for our case here we haven't learned about backend yet so we choose Firebase as our backend and here we focus on the Vue.js like last session we talk about computed property here computed property we use it to filter data okay? So maybe I should explain again how is the scenario of our application here in here we only have one component we have the app component here and we register it in the main.js okay inside here inside the main.js we just connect with the Firebase server by providing the information and so that we can access to our own data store inside Firebase and inside application after we configure everything correctly we connect to Firebase collection by writing this code inside our creative lifecycle here see this is the creative lifecycle the creative lifecycle will be triggered only once when you open your component when you open your application and it is executed just after your component is created okay it is different with this computed property lifecycle It's different from computed property. Computed is not a life cycle. Watch is also not a life cycle. Okay, for this computed property, it will be executed every time the information it depends on change. For here, for example, the done task, it depends on this task. See, the done task is depend on this dot task, and this dot task is coming from here. All right. So when this dot task here change, maybe there are new element, maybe you delete some from here, maybe you change some content. The done task and the to-do task here will be re-render, will be refreshed again and again. Got it? And here, in our example, we use Firebase to get the data from the file store. And then after that, we assign it into our task. See, task here is from here. So meaning that after the component is created, we make a request to Firebase to get the data. And when we get the data, we apply it, we assign it to our task array here. So computed property will be triggered immediately after the task change. And what it do a filter based on the is done here. If it is done, we push it into the done task. If not, we push it into the to-do task here. See? So for computed property, it change every time. The data it depends on change. So it's one of the benefits of it. Understand? So far, what we have here, we can start run deploy it. Run that. No, I'm run first. Okay. Okay, so this is what we have. If we do the inspect, we check the network again, we refresh it. See, there are a call in what you see here. What you see here, we call it a request. Okay, and in this request, we are making to the file istore.googleapi.com. This is the domain name of the Firebase server. Okay, in case you build your own server, you will have your own domain name as well in the future. When we work on the backend, we are going to build our own server, so you are not going to access to this anymore, but to our own server instead. But in our case here, we are accessing to file store, which is our server, our web server. Okay. So we are making a request, and then we get the data back from that request, and we render it in our application here. And here, writing report is marked as done because the data is, I think it was I should log into Firebase console. I need to switch another account. Because I have many accounts here. Okay, and this one that we have done. And we can check the file store database here. So we read all this data from here through this request. And then after we get the data, we render it here. So this is our client-side application. we call the API to the Firebase, and the Firebase return back the response. Okay, so this is the scenario between a client and server. All right, so here, what we can do to improve it. Like, for example, like this one. Here we have the item left here. It should show the number of the item of the task remaining, right? The most simple way is you can, by doing like count it, which is it, item left here. So maybe you can count it just by using like this to do task dot length. Can do simple like this. I think to do task. But it doesn't show. Maybe let's just remove it in here. I'm not sure. But whatever the goal is, I want to try to use it with the void. Okay, so let me create a data here. Let's say call it count task remain, and the default should be 0, something like this, and I put it inside here. Oh, I think because I write it wrong here. Here, it should work like this, all right? But I don't want to do like that. I want to use void property to do it instead. So let's use count item, count task remain like this. So see, it shows 0, all right? But I want to use the void property, and the void property will keep looking in the information here. When the information change, it will update the count item remain here. So to do that, you need to create a void property. Void, okay, like this. And inside, you need to mention which data that you need to void. For example, we want to void the done task here. Okay. Done task. Okay. When you write something like this, meaning that you are keep watching this variable every time the information change, it will be triggered. Done task change. Oh, it shouldn't be this. Okay. Can try it. Okay, you see done task change. But when the data update in the computed property, it will trigger again. Let's maybe let's create void mistake. Let's create another void mistake here. Okay. Let's refresh again. Okay, you see, I have two void property here. one is the done task, another one is the message. But if you see the log here, you see only done task change, the message done task change. You cannot find the message change, right? And why it is like that? Because the message is never changed after we assign the value into it. It never changed. Okay, so it doesn't trigger this one. Instead, it will trigger this one. And why it trigger? Because the done task here change after we modify the data inside here. You see, in created lifecycle, you make a request to Firebase to get the data, and then you assign it into task. So you are making the task change, right? And then when the task change, it triggers this one. It automatically triggers this one. Because done task here is a computed property which depends on the task. So the done task will be triggered after the task change from created lifecycle here. And watch task here, watch property here, keep watching if the done task is changed. That's why when it changes, it triggers again. So as a result, you see only the done task change, not a message change. Okay. And if you are trying to change the value for the task again, let me try to do it with the view here. Custom, I cannot change it. Let me try again. Maybe we can change it. Maybe let delete this. You see the done task change again. There are two terms now. Two terms here. See? You can try delete one more. You should show another one. 3. Because the task variable updated and the done task computed property change, so it trigger the void property here. We got what's wrong, right? Computed and void is similar. Actually, some people getting confused which one you should use. But the computed property, you need to remember that you need to return something back like this. Okay, you need to return something back in computed property, and it is an update automatically. But for watch property, you don't need to return anything. You can change anything you want. Maybe the done task change, you want to update the title, or you want to change the message here. Let's say when the done task is changed, you want to update the message. Now, task change like this. Okay, so it trigger again because I changed the message. But if you want to see the view data, you can see when let's try to remove something. Let's see, I need to refresh it. Okay, actually before first it hello and then it changed to task change here because I updated from the watch property.
Hello
này mới đã vôពីចំណុចខុសគ្នាទាំងអស់
ឈើអាចយល់ជាខ្មែរម្ដងទៀតតើតើជាមួយ Backend compute ហើយនឹង voice
អូខេខ្ញុំនិយាយម្ដងទៀតអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុង created life cycle យើងត្រូវចាំថា life cycle ទាំងអស់មិនមែនត្រឹមតែ created ទេ mounted ក៏ដោយ before mount ក៏ដោយ before create ក៏ដោយ before destroy ក៏ដោយទាំងអស់ហ្នឹង run តែម្ដងគត់ពេលយើងបើក program របស់យើងមកវា trigger តែម្ដងគត់អូខេយើងចង់វា trigger ម្ដងទៀតយើងត្រូវ refresh តាមឡើងវិញផ្ទុយពី computed property ផ្ទុយពី watch property ពីរនេះមិនមែន life cycle ទេណាពីរនេះគឺជា property អូខេឲ្យតោះហ្នឹង watch property ហើយនិង computed property មិនមែនជា life cycle ទេពីរហ្នឹងវា run នៅពេលណាដែល data ដែលវា depend ដែលវាតាក់ទងវាហៅ dependency បើសិនបើ data ដែលវា dependency នឹងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរវានឹង run ឡើងវិញឧទាហរណ៍របស់យើងគឺយើងមាន done task ហើយនឹង to do task ពីរហ្នឹងគឺជា computed property ហើយ done task ក៏ដោយ to do task ក៏ដោយពីរហ្នឹងគឺវា depend ទៅលើនេះលើ data មួយនេះឃើញទេអានេះគ្រាន់តែរបៀបសរសេរខុសគ្នាណាតែន័យតែមួយទេគេថា done task ហ្នឹងគឺចេញមកពីការធ្វើ filter ទៅលើ ada task មួយនេះអញ្ចឹងមានថាបើសិនបើ task ហ្នឹងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរឥឡូវហ្នឹងយើង task របស់យើងមាន3 task របស់យើងមាន3យើងមកមើលក្នុងនេះថាមាន3អញ្ចឹងបើសិនបើ task យើងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរខ្ញុំ console log មកខ្ញុំ clear នេះចោលខ្ញុំលុបវាមួយមានថាខ្ញុំកំពុងតែផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ task ហ្នឹងហើយអូខេយើងមកមើលម្ដងទៀតយើងឃើញវា log ចេញមកពី done task change តោះនេះខុសពី life cycle នោះអត់ run ឡើងវិញទេអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចសាកlog វាមកវាធិតចឹងទៅហើយខ្ញុំអាចបង្កើត life cycle មួយទៀតដែលគឺនិយមប្រើគឺ mounted ខ្ញុំ log 2ចឹងមកហើយបើសិនបើខ្ញុំ refresh វាខ្ញុំឃើញ created mounted done task change message change អូខេឥឡូវខ្ញុំសាក clear វាចោលបន្ទាប់មកយើងមកយក view យើងលុបមួយចោលយើងទៅមើល console វិញយើងឃើញ mounted និង created អត់ឡើងវិញទេដោយសារតែយើងអត់បាន refresh page ទេយើងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ data នៅក្នុង task អញ្ចឹង done task នឹង change អូខេហើយហេតុអីវា change គឺដោយសារវា depend ទៅលើ task អញ្ចឹងបើសិនបើយើងបង្កើត computed property មួយផ្សេងទៀតថា message updated អូខេដែល message updated ហ្នឹងគឺវា depend ទៅ message data របស់យើងណាពីលើយើងមាន message មិនចឹងthis message message មិនចេះ message របស់យើងគឺ hello ហ្នឹងបើសិនបើ message copy hello យើងឲ្យវាទៅ change not change អូខេ message ចឹងយល់ទេនេះខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែឧទាហរណ៍ខ្ញុំបង្កើត computed property មួយទៀតឈ្មោះថា message updated ហើយការងាររបស់វាគ្រាន់តែឆែកមើលថា message copy hello ឬក៏អត់ទេ message របស់យើង default គឺ hello នេះណាអញ្ចឹងបើសិនបើវា copy hello ខ្ញុំឲ្យ trigger ថា not change បើសិនវា copy hello ខ្ញុំដាក់ trigger ថាពីថា change បើសិនបើអត់ទេខ្ញុំដាក់ពី not change អូខេយើងសាកទៅប៉ុណ្ណឹងយើងទៅ browser របស់យើងអានេះពេលវា run ដំបូងវាត្រូវប្រាប់ដើមចឹងខ្ញុំបុកពីចោលសិនដើម្បីតេស្តវាតែឥឡូវខ្ញុំទៅខ្ញុំទៅ refresh ដើម្បីបានថាសមកវិញ3មកវិញខ្ញុំលុបអានេះចោលអស់សិនតោះមកខ្ញុំលុបថាសនេះចោលមួយយើងមក console យើងឃើញមានតែ done task change ទេ message change របស់យើងគឺអត់មានអានោះខ្ញុំត្រូវនិយាយ console មួយដែរមកអូខេ console គ្រប់កន្លែងដើម្បីឲ្យដឹងថាមួយណា run ក៏អត់អានេះយើងដាក់នេះមួយដែរអូខេហើយខ្ញុំបិទវត្តនេះចោលសិនកុំឲ្យច្រឡំគ្នាព្រោះមិញយើង log នៅនេះមួយដែរចឹងវិញពេកបិទវត្តចោលមួយទៀតអូខេចឹងយើង refresh លើវិញម្ដងទៀត created to do task change done task change mounted to do task change done task change អូខេអាហ្នឹងអត់អីទេយើងលុបពីចោលដើម្បីកុំឲ្យវិញហើយបន្ទាប់មកយើងសាកផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយើងលុប reactive មួយយើង inspect វាយើងឃើញ to do task change ហើយ done task change ហេតុអីបាន2 trigger ដោយសារតែពីរហ្នឹងគឺវា depend ទៅលើ task ទាំងពីរអា to do task ក៏ depend លើ task ดันทัสนี่ก็ depend លើ task នឹងដែរដោយសារថាយើងមើល code របស់យើងមើលគឺយើងបានមកពី filter មកពី task នឹងមកជាងហើយបើវា trigger ទាំងពីរផ្ទុយទៅវិញអា message update របស់យើងអត់ load ទេដោយសារវាអត់ depend ទៅលើ task ទេវា depend ទៅលើ message នេះអញ្ចឹងប្រសិនបើខ្ញុំផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ value របស់ message ហ្នឹងវិញ message របស់យើងដូរដាក់ hello 1ឧទាហរណ៍យើងឃើញ load message chain មួយទៀតទេអូខេអាហ្នឹងគឺ competitive property ណាតោះអញ្ចឹងហើយប្រសិនបើយើងនិយាយពី void នេះវិញ void ហ្នឹងគឺស្តៀងគ្នាជាមួយនឹង competitive property ហ្នឹងដែរប៉ុន្តែ void ហ្នឹងវាមាន option ច្រើនដែលយើងធ្វើបាន competitive property អត់មានallow យើងឲ្យផ្លាស់ប្ដូរបានច្រើនទេតែវា simple ជាងក្នុងករណី void ណា void យើងត្រូវប្រាប់ថា data ហ្នឹងដែលយើងចង់ void ពាក្យថា void ហ្នឹងគឺអង្គុយមើលវារហូតតាមពេលដែលមានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរខ្ញុំត្រូវធ្វើអីមួយអញ្ចឹងការងារខ្ញុំសរសេរនេះគឺថាខ្ញុំកំពុងតែអង្គុយចាំមើលថាដាំឋានមានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរអត់បើផ្លាស់ប្ដូរខ្ញុំធ្វើអីមួយដូចគ្នាដែរមានផ្សេងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរអត់បើមានផ្សេងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរខ្ញុំធ្វើអីមួយអូខេហើយ void ហ្នឹងវាអាច void data ក៏បានវាអាច void competitive property ក៏បាននេះប៉ុន្តែវាអាច void method ក្រុមនេះបានដែរណាវា void តែ object ណាដែលមាន value method នេះយើងអាច void បានទេអញ្ចឹងឧទាហរណ៍ថាឥឡូវយើងដាំ task នេះខ្ញុំ void ដាំ task ប្រើពាក្យ void ពីមុខបាច់ច្រឡំអានេះ message ដូចគ្នាដែរអូខេបើយើងសេអញ្ចឹងយើង reframe ម្ដងទៀតទាំងអស់នេះគឺមកពីចេញមកពី competitive property អានេះគឺចេញមកពី void អូខេតែពួកយើងឆ្ងល់ក្រោមហេតុអីបានវាផ្លាស់ប្ដូរនេះដោយសារតែ competitive វា trigger 2 ដងដោយសារតែយើង assign value ទៅឲ្យ task ចឹងវា trigger 2 ដងចាឥឡូវយើងលុបវាចោលនេះសិនយើងចូលមកដល់កន្លែងនេះបើសិនបើខ្ញុំលុបកណ្ដាលម្ដងទៀតយើងទៅមើល console យើងឃើញថាអាពីរនេះ trigger ដោយសារតែយើងប្រើទៅមួយ competitive property អានេះគឺ trigger អាលើនេះអាក្រោមនេះគឺ trigger ពី competitive property អានេះ trigger ពី void អូខេព្រោះ void ហ្នឹង run ភ្លាមនៅពេលណាដែលដានថាផ្លាស់ប្ដូរអញ្ចឹងយើងឃើញវា trigger បន្តពីនេះភ្លាមតោះណាអញ្ចឹងគ្រាន់តែបញ្ហាមួយទៀតគឺយើងច្រឡំគ្នាថាពេលណាគូប្រើ void ពេលណាយើងប្រើ competitive ព្រោះវាស្ទៀងគ្នាអូខេហើយដើម្បីធ្វើអាណាយើងត្រូវការមាន experience ហើយឥឡូវនេះខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែយើង search មើលសិនcompetitive vs void អូខេវាមានកន្លែងដែលគេបញ្យល់ចំណាប់ហើយ competitive vs void វិញយូអូខេវាមានច្រើនណាស់ព្រោះអ្នកដែលច្រឡំមិនមែនតែយើងទេមានច្រើនគេច្រឡំតែពីរខុសគ្នាហើយណាអូខេវាមានរបស់ច្រើនដែលយើងអាចមើលបានក្នុងនេះដែលយើងមើលថាពីរខុសគ្នាហ្មងហើយវាមានច្រើនដែលយើងបញ្យល់អាហ្នឹងខ្ញុំ recommend ឲ្យពួកយើងមើលក្នុងនេះបន្ថែមទៀតទៅមិនមែនតែ website ហ្នឹងទេ search មើលឃើញមានណា search មើលក្រៅឃើញមានតែអ្វីដែលខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យ focus នេះគឺយើងឧទាហរណ៍វាមានច្រើនពីហ្នឹងវាមិនមានតែមួយហ្នឹងឯងដែលខ្ញុំលើកមកនិយាយមិញហ្នឹងគឺក្នុងករណី competitive property ការដែលយើងកែប្រែនៅពេលដែល task នឹងកែប្រែគឺ return data ឬក៏ជា search ជាអីដែល depend លើ task មួយហ្នឹងដែល depend លើ task នេះឧទាហរណ៍ដូចក្នុងករណីរបស់យើងគឺយើង filter task ណាដែលដាំ task ណាដែលមិនទាន់ដាំប៉ុន្តែបើ void property វិញគេប្រើវាដើម្បីទៅធ្វើរឿងអីមួយផ្សេងមួយទៀតមិនមែនប្រើដើម្បី filter ទេបើមិនខ្ញុំចង់ធ្វើ filter ចង់អីខ្ញុំប្រើមួយ computer ទៅចប់ហើយក្នុងករណី void វិញយើងប្រើវាដើម្បីធ្វើមួយផ្សេងទៀតឧទាហរណ៍ដល់ពេលដែល task យើង change ខ្ញុំចង់តែផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ value ណាមួយផ្សេងដូចខ្ញុំបង្កើតពីលើមកមិញយើងមានស្អីគេ count មិញនេះ count task វាមែននេះអូខេអញ្ចឹងឧទាហរណ៍ខ្ញុំធ្វើអញ្ចឹងដល់ពេលដែល task នឹង change ខ្ញុំចង់ update list.count task remain ស្មើអញ្ចឹង this dot done task dot bang okនេះតាមពិតបើយើងមើលទៅវាមិនតំណងគួរសេអញ្ចឹងតែនេះខ្ញុំគាត់ជាឧទាហរណ៍ណាខ្ញុំចង់បង្ហាញថាដល់ពេលដែល done task នឹង change ខ្ញុំចង់ទៅ update value របស់នេះអូខេនេះគាត់ជាឧទាហរណ៍នេះវា refresh មួយសិនខ្ញុំមិនប្រើ done task ណាតាមពិត done task change design ចេះ done task វានៅខាងនេះខ្ញុំច្រឡំមកដាក់ក្នុងនេះអូខេចូលសេអញ្ចឹងដូរ mistake នេះវិញណាចេះបដ ாய் ទៅកុំឲ្យពិបាកមួយ task done មួយ item done អញ្ចឹងករណីយើងប្រើ void វាមិនប្រើសម្រាប់ filter data ដែលចេញមកពី dependency ទេការងារប្រើ void សំខាន់គឺយើងប្រើដើម្បីទៅ trigger រឿងអីមួយដល់ពេលដែល data របស់យើងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរប៉ុន្តែផ្លាស់ប្ដូរហ្នឹងខ្ញុំអាចទៅធ្វើផ្សេងក៏បានខ្ញុំចង់ទៅ update account ក៏បានឬក៏ខ្ញុំទៅដូរ mistake ក៏បាន change អញ្ចឹងទៅអូខេខ្ញុំទៅ render UI នៅលើនេះក៏បានខ្ញុំទៅ call API ណាផ្សេងទៀតក៏បានអូខេហ្នឹងចំណុចខុសគ្នាសំខាន់ណាតែបើ computer property យើងអត់ធ្វើអញ្ចឹងទេ computer property ប្រើដើម្បីតែធ្វើ data ដែលតទៅជាមួយនឹង dependency ហ្នឹងទេអត់ទៅធ្វើទៅផ្លាស់ប្ដូរព័ត៌មានផ្សេងទេយកខុសគ្នាឡើយហ្នឹងណា
អត់ចាចំពោះវា trigger ទៅលើ property របស់ computer តែមួយទេឬក៏វាអាចបាន property ទៅលើផ្សេងទៀត function
បាទខ្ញុំប្រាប់នេះអញ្ចឹងតែវាអាច void ទៅលើពពួក computer property វាអាច void ទៅលើ data void ពីកន្លែងហ្នឹងអូខេយើងអាច void លើហ្នឹងយើងអាច void លើ computer property ហើយនឹងមួយទៀតគឺវាអាច void លើ prop ពួកយើងថាពេញ prop ទេ prop នេះគឺតកតងជាមួយនឹង parent child លឹងប្រាប់មុននោះ prop នេះมันជា data ដែល pass ពី parent មកអូខេអញ្ចឹងយើងអាច void លើ prop នឹងបានដែរអូខេអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំអាចយកវាទៅសេនៅក្នុង void នេះបានដូចគ្នាចឹងណាដូចគ្នាអញ្ចឹងអូខេហើយដាក់ console.log មក data from parent coming អូខេដូចគ្នាcòn សំខាន់ឈ្មោះឈ្មោះរបស់វានេះជា variable ណាប៉ុន្តែយើងចង់ void យើងត្រូវដាក់វងកញ្ចក់អង្គុយនេះអូខេមានវិធីមួយទៀតគឺយើងសរសេរមួយបែបទៀតដូចគ្នាយ៉ាងណាគ្រាន់តែមកសរសេរមួយបែបទៀតគឺផ្សេងចេះវិញយើងប្រើពាក្យ handler ចឹងណាតាមមកបានមាន function តាមមកយើងយក view នេះទៅដាក់ខាងក្នុងហ្នឹងno នេះវាត្រូវមានសេខំដែរ syntax ចូលយើង click syntax របស់វាហើយគាត់វិធីសរសេរមួយទៀតណាយើង search syntax របស់វាតិចមក UJS void syntax ក្នុងនេះអាចប្រើពាក្យថា voucher ហើយប្រើ voucher ក៏បានប្រើ void property ក៏បានរបៀបសរសេរក៏វាមានច្រើន property ដែលយើងសរសេរបានអូខេអានេះគឺសរសេរជាលក្ខណៈ variable នេះសរសេរជាលក្ខណៈ object ខ្ញុំព្យាយាមសរសេរមិញហ្នឹងសត្វ void.2 អញ្ចឹងហើយតមក message 2យ៉ាងនេះ2ចេះអានេះវិធីសរសេរមួយផ្សេងទៀតដែលយើងបោះ handler ហ្នឹងគឺជា attribute ដើម្បី store callback យើងចង់ធ្វើអីយើងសរសេរក្នុងនេះ នេះវាទីផ្សេងមួយទៀតណាអូខេហើយពេលយើងសេប្រូក្រាមទៅថ្ងៃមុខយើងអាសាធ្វើឲ្យពួកហ្នឹងព្រោះវាជាអត់ផុតទេរឿងធ្វើការធ្វើ filter រឿងធ្វើការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ content អាស្រ័យលើ data មួយទៀតសម័យឧទាហរណ៍ថាពេលណាដែលខ្ញុំទទួលបាន list to do ខ្ញុំចង់call API មួយដើម្បីទៅ get ព័ត៌មានអីថែមពីលើហ្នឹងឧទាហរណ៍ប៉ុន្តែ call ព័ត៌មានលុះត្រាតែ data to do ហ្នឹងមានបានខ្ញុំ call ឧទាហរណ៍អញ្ចឹងវាលក្ខណៈ dependency អញ្ចឹងបើសិនបើយើងចូល class នេះហ្នឹងត្រូវទៅ say void អូខេតែបើសិនបើថាអូ data មកខ្ញុំត្រូវការមានធ្វើការ filter ខ្ញុំត្រូវការធ្វើ search អាហ្នឹងខ្ញុំត្រូវការប្រើ computed property តោះនេះអានោះធ្វើទៅចាប់តាមឃើញមានផលប្រយោជន៍របស់វា
សង្ឃឹមមួយទៀតតែបើសិនជាappropriate ដែលយើងឬក៏ data ដែលយើងវាមានដែរប៉ុន្តែយើងអត់ទាន់បង្កើតវាដូចយើងមាន item មួយអញ្ចឹងយើងមានvariable នៅក្នុងហ្នឹងហើយប៉ុន្តែ item ហ្នឹងយើងអត់ទាន់បង្កើតទេតោះតែយើងចុចប៊ូតុងមួយបាន item បង្កើត
ឧទាហរណ៍មកខ្ញុំសរសេរ item ក្នុងនោះមាន variable
បាទ
អញ្ចឹងមែនចង់និយាយអញ្ចឹងមែន item មួយអញ្ចឹងហើយមិនទៀត
ហើយនៅបើសិនជាយើងចុចប៊ូតុងមួយទៅវានឹងបង្កើតនៅ variable ហ្នឹងហើយយើង
ជាប៊ូតុងមួយដើម្បីបដូរ variable ហ្នឹងមែន
បាទចឹង
ខ្ញុំអាចដាក់ប៊ូតុងក្រោមនេះមួយមកចឹងមែនអានេះខ្ញុំបដូរ item ទៅលេខ2វិញណាមិនទៀត
ដល់ពេលបដូរវាយើងចង់ពិនិត្យលើវាអញ្ចឹងឆើប៉ុន្តែ variable ហ្នឹងវាអត់ទាន់កើតឡើងទេអត់ទាន់មានទេ
variable អត់ទាន់មាន
បាទអត់ទាន់មាននៅពេលដែលយើងចុចប៊ូតុងហ្នឹងឆើ
អូចង់និយាយថាក្នុងនេះអត់ទាន់មានទៀត
បាទឆើបាទ
ហើយតាមហើយពេលយើងចុចប៊ូតុងបានមាន item ហ្នឹងមក
បាទ
អាហ្នឹងធ្វើអាហ្នឹងដើរទៅអត់ដើរទេនេះដាក់ចឹងអត់ដើររត់ error នេះខ្ញុំតិចមើល view ក្នុងនេះវាអត់មាន item ហ្នឹងមកព្រោះក្នុងករណីនេះវាអត់អាចបង្កើត variable ចឹងមកបានទេអានេះវាអត់មានវិធីណាដែលយើងធ្វើអញ្ចឹងកើតទេទៅរួចទោះតែយើង declare variable ហ្នឹងសិនយើងអាច declare item ហើយបើយើងអត់ចង់ដាក់ value ទេយើងប្រើពាក្យ undefined ឬក៏យើងប្រើពាក្យ new ក៏បានដែរប៉ុន្តែលក្ខខណ្ឌត្រូវតែមាននេះសិនបើសិនបើយើងថាឥឡូវក្នុងនេះអត់មានទេក្នុងនេះអត់មានទេហើយខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យ click item button នេះបានយើងបង្កើតនឹងមកអាហ្នឹងទោះយើងប្រើ void ក៏ដោយយើងប្រើ computed ក៏ដោយគឺធ្វើឲ្យកើតតោះនេះ
ចឹងមានន័យថាបើយើងចង់ឲ្យប្រើបានលុះត្រាតែយើងបង្កើតបាទ declare វាហើយសិន
declare ហ្នឹងយើងដាក់ new ជាក៏បានឬក៏យើងប្រើ undefined ក៏បានដំបូងថាមានហ្នឹងមួយសិនគាត់ value របស់វាអត់ទាន់មានតែពេលដែលយើង click គឺយើងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរ item ហ្នឹងទៅជាលេខមកអញ្ចឹងមកនេះ item undefined ខ្ញុំ change វាទៅខ្ញុំគិតថាបញ្ហាមកពីនេះឥឡូវខ្ញុំលុបនេះវិញព្រោះយើងប្រើ Vue.js 3វាមាន extension 2ខ្ញុំសាក់ផ្លាស់ប្ដូរទៅ extension នេះសិនsetting extension Vue.js Dev Tool វាមាន2 version ដែរខ្ញុំមានអារម្មណ៍ថា version 3គឺមានបញ្ហា error អញ្ចឹងវាអត់ update អញ្ចឹងបើថ្ងៃមុនព្យាយាមប្រើ version 2 Vue.js Dev Tool វាមាន Dev Tool សម្រាប់ version 3 មួយ version Dev Tool សម្រាប់ version 2 មួយ Vì chẹt đó. Này với mẹ pi nhỉ? Mới ní cứ là version 7. Mới là version 2. Với mẹ ní 10 mà tiện lại. Sẽ là hay chán bị. Chẳng sẽ install này mới đó. Hay tầm á dương thử disable mỗi bạn mùi. Dương thử bật này mối bạn này rồi. Ok. Mình phải bật này chó, bật bằng 10 triệu bàn đi update. Bình đầu tiên. View. Item undefined, change here. Tôi có syntax gì khó. Change item. Nhưng trong xe mình cứ update direct time đó, ta đưa vào kênh đó. Tạ đồ chơi với như vậy. Ok, sẽ chèn đó. Press. Item undefined, change. Nóមាន error ទេមកគឺ item នេះជាដូរ console មួយអញ្ចឹងនេះ load ប៉ុន្តែ this out item ស្មើនេះថាជាត្រូវដាក់ new អញ្ចឹងដងទៀតនេះនឹងបញ្ហានេះដូចមានអីផ្សេងខុសអូ item new នេះក៏ថាបញ្ហាផ្សេងប៉ុន្តែសំខាន់សំណួររបស់យើង simple គឺត្រូវតែមាន item ហ្នឹងតែខ្ញុំមិនដឹងថាហេតុអីបើវាអត់ load ឲ្យគាត់មាន error ហ្នឹងគេតែសំខាន់ item នេះត្រូវតែ define នៅក្នុង data section មិនមានអាចផ្លាស់ប្ដូរបានវាអត់អាចលុបនេះចោលហើយបន្តមកបានយើងបង្កើតនៅតាមក្រោយអត់អាចធ្វើចឹងកើតទេត្រូវតែមាននៅក្នុងហ្នឹងសិនទេហើយមួយនេះខ្ញុំអត់ច្បាស់ដែរវាអត់មានអី complicated ទេនេះគ្រាន់តែ click ដូរ value ដល់ហើយទៅដូរមានអីសួរផ្សេងហ្នឹងខ្ញុំសួរមកខ្ញុំប្រាប់តាមក្រោយសាប់ upload ទៀតសិនវាគួរតែដើរវា load តែឥឡូវសាញ់ចែមដល់ this that item ណា item តាមមកយើងអាចសាក void វាគេលោមកពី extension វាបញ្ហាយើងធ្វើ deploy មិនអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំ void item ហ្នឹងវាមកសេនឹងនេះសេនឹង void នេះ void ទៅយើងហើយ change មើលថាតើមាន item នឹង change គឺយើង lock វាចេញមក Okay. Chào. Bắt đầu. Bị bật đấy. Ok, nó load anh nè. Hãy thăm chơi còn là primer là con app đi bắt đầu. Chẳng có thăm một bài extension đi. Tập có bị chơi ta nó bị phải nên đưa vào đây. Đây bây giờ chọn đấy ai sạc lọc điều kháng khéo mới cho các bạn này. Chơi cái lại nam mùi mà đã về sẵn lắm. Các bài này nó nhìn đặt. Chơi má. Cho như ai lọc. Hãy thăm nó không một khéo bạn. Chơi. Cái biết đâu rồi nhỉ. Còn ta nó không là ví dụ nếu việc lọc thì mà chẳng phanh hai extension này. Chỉ muốn nó ví dụ quay phanh hai extension chẳng bằng khi dân phẫu tí. Ok, chẳng miền ấy xua tiết đó.
ចំពោះយើងខល method នៅក្នុង watch ហ្នឹងយើងដាក់ឈ្មោះដូចគ្នាឬក៏យើងដាក់ឈ្មោះខុសគ្នាច្រើន
Method ចង់និយាយឈ្មោះ watch ទេ watch
បាទ
property
ច្រើន property ក្នុង watch
នេះហ៎ចង់និយាយនេះមែន
បាទខ្ញុំឃើញច្រើន
លក្ខខណ្ឌគឺត្រូវដូចគ្នាទៅនឹង variable ដែលយើងចង់ watch
អញ្ចឹងដូចឈ្មោះ variable វិញ
បាទដូចឈ្មោះ variable គ្រាន់តែថែមវងចងក្រោយនេះអានេះបើសិនបើយើងសរសេរ method តម្រងបែបនេះបើសិនបើយើងសរសេរជាលក្ខណៈ handler យើងអត់ចាំបាច់ដាក់វងកញ្ចក់នេះទេយើងដាក់ឈ្មោះ variable មកយើងបង្កើត handler ជាមួយវិញតែលក្ខខណ្ឌគឺត្រូវតែដូចគ្នាវាអាស្រ័យលើហ្នឹងដើម្បីវាចាំបាច់ check មើលថា data ណាដែលវាគួរ watch អូខេ computer ធាតុហ្នឹងcomputer ធាតុឈ្មោះនេះយើងដាក់អីក៏បានដែរឈ្មោះនេះដាក់អីក៏បានដែរតែសំខាន់វា depend លើ variable ក្នុងហ្នឹងសរសេរត្រូវបានទេចាសម្រាប់នេះដូចជាអត់មានត្រូវបន្ថែមពីលើហ្នឹងទេ life cycle វាមានច្រើនប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំប្រាប់មិញគឺវាមានដែលយើងប្រើច្រើនគឺ create នេះហើយនឹង mount នេះពីរហ្នឹងដែលយើងប្រើញឹកញាប់ហើយសិនបើសួរថាប្រើមួយណាបើសិនបើយើងធ្វើការតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង user interface តាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង data ដែលយើង call អីដែលតាក់ទងមួយ API នេះគេថាយើងចង់ធ្វើអីមួយហើយយើងចង់ឲ្យច្បាស់ថាព័ត៌មានត្រូវតែមានបានយើងធ្វើការហ្នឹងព្រោះតែ UI របស់យើង render ចប់បានយើងត្រូវធ្វើហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងសរសេរវានៅក្នុង mounted ព្រោះ mounted គឺជា life cycle មួយដែល trigger លុះត្រាតែអ្វីៗគឺ ready អស់ហើយអ្វីៗ ready អស់ហើយបានវា trigger creative នេះអត់ទេ creative នេះគ្រាន់តែ component creative ភ្លាមគឺវា trigger ភ្លាមមកអញ្ចឹងអានេះគឺវា trigger មុនមួយនេះហើយបើចង់បានមុននឹងទៀតចង់បានមុន before creative នឹងទៀតយើងមាន life cycle មួយទៀតគឺ before create life cycle ហ្នឹងគឺ run មុនអា creative នេះទៀតប៉ុន្តែជាធម្មតាយើងអត់ត្រូវសរសេរនឹងនេះដោយសារវាអត់មានការងារណាដែលយើងត្រូវមកតែក្នុងហ្នឹងធម្មតាគឺមានតែពីរនេះដែលគេប្រើញឹកញាប់តែនេះបើយើងគាត់ឲ្យចង់ console log មើលទៅយើងអាចក្នុងហ្នឹងបាន
ចុះcreate ហ្នឹងវាដើរនៅពេលដែលវាដូរ domain ណាដូរអា route ហ្នឹងណា
នៅពេលដែលយើងដូរ route មានថាយើងបដូរ component អូខេអញ្ចឹងបើសិនបើយើងបដូរ component យើងបដូរសំខាន់យើងបដូរ component មួយណាឧទាហរណ៍ចេះចាត់ទុកថាយើងមាន component ធំមួយហើយនៅក្នុង component ធំមួយនោះយើងមាន component តូចៗ2 3ទៀតឧទាហរណ៍អញ្ចឹងនេះ component ធំ component sidebar component container ប្រសិនបើយើង define route របស់យើងនៅថានៅពេលដែលយើងបដូរ route គឺយើងមិន update ទាំងអស់នេះទេយើង update តែមួយនេះយើង change តែ component មួយហ្នឹងណាអញ្ចឹងប្រសិនបើយើងសរសេរ life cycle នៅលើ component មួយនេះវានឹង trigger ឡើងវិញប៉ុន្តែប្រសិនបើយើងសរសេរ life cycle នៅលើអានេះក៏ដោយអានេះក៏ដោយហើយយើងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរតាមមួយនេះអានេះអត់រំឡើងវិញទេតោះនេះអញ្ចឹងមកថាវា depend វាយើងបដូរ route ហ្នឹងយើងបដូរ component មួយណាតែប្រសិនបើ route របស់យើងគឺបដូរទាំងអស់បដូរទាំងមូលនេះហ្មងអញ្ចឹង life cycle យើងសរសេរកន្លែងណាក៏ដោយក៏ត្រូវវារំឡើងវិញដែរអូខេព្រោះថា route ពេលដែលយើងបដូរ route គឺយើងកំពុងតែ replace component មួយដាក់ component មួយផ្សេងទៀតមកអញ្ចឹងនៅពេលដែលវា replace ហ្នឹងវាត្រូវឆ្លងកាត់ life cycle វាឡើងវិញអូខេតែនេះគាត់ចង់ឲ្យបញ្ជាក់ឲ្យច្បាស់ទៅ life cycle ហើយនឹង property 2មិញឲ្យសួរនៅតើតើមួយ life cycle នឹង property
អស់ហើយឈើ
អូខេអានេះដោយសារយើងអត់មានឧទាហរណ៍បើសិនបើមានឧទាហរណ៍ផ្សេងបានល្អជាងតែនេះដោយសារខ្ញុំយក to do app មកធ្វើអញ្ចឹងវាអត់មានអីធ្វើទៅមួយ void អានេះខ្ញុំគាត់ឧទាហរណ៍បានតែប៉ុណ្ណឹងបើ computer ហ្នឹងយើងឃើញហើយតែ void ដូចជាអត់មាន case ណាដែលខ្ញុំមិនតន់យកមកធ្វើបានប៉ុន្តែពេលយើងចាប់បានធ្វើ project ខ្ញុំគិតថាយើងនឹងជួបនឹងច្រើនហើយពេលហ្នឹងពួកយើងអាចសួរខ្ញុំបានបន្តទៀតថាគួរប្រើមួយណាគួរប្រើ void ឬគួរប្រើ property computed តែអត់អីទេឥឡូវធ្វើមិនអីចាប់បានប៉ុណ្ណឹងហើយថ្ងៃហ្នឹងយើងបានតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង interaction មួយ backend ហើយអាទិត្យក្រោយយើងនឹង cover តាក់ទងមួយ backend តាក់ទងជាមួយនឹងស្គី express ដោយខ្ញុំនឹងបង្ហាញអំពីinstallation ខ្ញុំ skip វាពួកយើងចេះ install ខ្លួនឯងណាព្រោះមួយតែពេលយូរខ្ញុំគិតថាយ៉ាងហោច install បានណាយើង skip installation ប៉ុន្តែយើងចាប់ផ្ដើមចូលមកកន្លែង middleware ដែលយើងលើកមិញហ្នឹងថាអត់ទាន់ច្បាស់ middleware ហើយនឹងតាក់ទងមួយ session ហើយនឹង cookie អូខេហើយ complete presentation គឺថ្ងៃ8អានេះខ្ញុំនឹងទានអត់មានបញ្ជាក់ថាឲ្យធ្វើដល់ដំណើរកំណត់ជាក់លាក់ហ្នឹងគឺធ្វើបានប៉ុន្មាន present ប៉ុណ្ណឹងអញ្ចឹងត្រៀម presentation ថ្ងៃ8ធ្វើបានប៉ុន្មាន present ប៉ុណ្ណឹងចែកកាំងគ្នារបៀបម៉េចអ្នកណាធ្វើអីធ្វើបានហើយដល់ណាអាហ្នឹងគឺយើង demo ពេលហ្នឹងគោលដៅគ្រាន់តែចង់ដឹង progress ពួកយើងថាយើងបានធ្វើអីខ្លះអូខេអញ្ចឹងត្រៀមផង
ច្រើនឥឡូវច្រើន
បាទ